So, are you guys studying or working or?
Yeah, we're both students at Acadia Divinity College.
Oh, cool. Okay. Very good. That's great. So it's been online, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all been online.
All right, so we are officially now live on YouTube.
Nice.
All right, well, let's let in the students and we'll get started, I guess. Well, I guess there's still a couple minutes. Should we wait till 7 to let them all in at once? Should we let them kind of, we'll let them filter in. Here we go.
Wow.
It'll take them a minute to get themselves all their audio running. Hey, everybody. All right. Well, guys, welcome to our online rally night. Woohoo! So much hype.
Izzy Dobson's got the hype.
Oh man, Izzy, your room is hype. That's so sweet. Make sure everyone can hear us, I guess. Just making sure if you can't hear us, you can use the chat. For tonight, we are going to leave you all muted because of the nature of a panel discussion. There's going to be a number of us on the panel who will be talking, and that it would just be kind of chaotic if everyone was unmuted. So if you have a question or if you need help with something or if your audio is not working, feel free to type in the chat. And we can help you. But yeah, well, guys, I'm sure a lot of you know me and Lindsay, most of you should, but probably a lot of you don't know the other people who are in our panel. And so up here, I don't know if they're all at the top for you guys. Hopefully you can see them all at the top. But we've got Caleb Dixon and Cassidy Beatty, who are dating, and then Gord and Carol Hay, who are married, and me and Lindsay, and we're married. And so it is now 7 o'clock. And so I think we will get started because we don't want to keep anyone much longer than we said we would. Originally, I had said 7 to 7:45, but I have a feeling we're going to go till 8. So if that's cool with everyone, I think it's going to be worth their time. But what I wanted to start tonight doing is just each of us kind of sharing a bit of our stories as couples. So you guys can get to know, well, the other couples. You guys probably mostly know mine and Lindsay's story for the most part. But what I would love to do is to start with Caleb and Cassidy. If you guys would share a bit of the story of your guys' relationship.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. So we're Caleb and Cassidy. We met at Mount Traper Bible Camp, which is up near Truro. And we were both working there as volunteers a few summers back. And so we worked together, and then when the summer ended, we kept talking through, we kept Instagram messaging each other and started becoming really good friends, and then started dating about a year later.
Yeah, so we have officially been dating for 3 years now. So yeah, we are also currently students together at university. And yeah, that's basically where we are now.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, guys. Carol and Gord, tell us a bit about your relationship. How did you guys meet? How long have you been together? Tell us all the deets.
All right. Well, I think it was actually in 1990 that we met. I was at college actually, and Gord was working in Barrington area where my family's from. And he actually met my parents first. So he met them and they invited him over different times and whatever. And he learned that there's a daughter in college somewhere. Anyway, and then, well, he said, I guess he saw my picture on the fridge and my dad said his eyes locked. So that was kind of how it started. But anyway, Gord, my parents' band to take a group of students to Spring Forth, and the windshield got broken, and so he had to keep in contact with them. Anyway, so all this to say, one of the times when he was back and forth with my parents, we met, and then he called me, I think the next day maybe, and asked me to go out to a movie. So we did that, and then it's history.
Thank you guys for sharing. Sorry, I just got a phone call from Ethelyn. Ethelyn's Dive Deeper group. Ethelyn was trying to join the meeting via phone, and I thought I explained to her how she could do that. But I have a feeling she's having trouble because she's trying to call me.
Okay.
But I think I don't have time to help Ethelyn tonight. But sorry, Ethelyn, if you're watching this later. Ethelyn is amazing. I so appreciate how she's willing to host your guys' Dive Deeper group. And she shared with some of the ladies at the church's ABW meeting, the like women's group. And she was just so ecstatic about getting to have you guys to her house every week for Dive Deeper. So yeah, she's sad that she won't have you guys in person for a couple of weeks, but more about that later. Anyway, why don't we jump into the stories that you students, or the questions that you students asked us and sent in. Oh, our story. Yeah, right. We should do that too. Okay, thank you.
Story?
Yeah. So how did we meet?
Yeah, so we met at Bible college.
Yeah. So Lindsay was in her second year when I started my first year, and someone says dance class. That is kind of not quite how we met, but it is part of our story. Anyway, yeah, so I was in my first year, and then it was really a year later, my second year, Lindsay's third year, we started talking in September because a few of our friends were trying to set us up. Like our friend JJ, me and him were spending the summer together at camps, and he was like, Oliver, you and Lindsay, I think you guys would be good together. And I'm like, I'd be interested in that. And then I think he talked to you as well.
Yeah.
And anyway, he was dating one of our mutual friends. And so then we would play board games together, the four of us. And anyway, so we started talking that fall. Then it was in November, we officially started dating. And then we were together for a year and a half in university until Lindsay graduated. And then it was after you graduated, we got engaged that next summer. So it was a year and a half we were dating, then we got engaged. And then the next summer, a year later, so we were together 2.5 years, we got married. And that was 2017. So this June will be 4 years we've been married. Yeah. Awesome. That's our story. The short version. Okay, so let's jump into these questions that you guys sent us, because I want to say, first of all, those of you who sent in questions, you guys sent some awesome questions. There was some really great all around questions, from things like how do you decide who to date, and then some deeper questions like, how do you support the dreams of your spouse? And I'm like, man, we might not have time to get to that tonight. That's a bit down the road for most of you, but I really appreciated that. I thought that was a beautiful question. But what we're going to start with is at the beginning. So how do you decide who to date? And I'm going to throw that question first to Caleb and Cassidy.
Yeah, Cass, you want to start and then I'll add on?
Yeah, so something that we kind of talked about that we thought was pretty important is to look for someone that shares a common interest in their love for Jesus. So, as Christians, our goal is to really love Jesus, love God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind. And so one of the ways we can do that is by looking for someone that will encourage us and point us to God. And so, as we go through life and we have the great joys and there's also struggles, it's important to find someone that can really push you closer to God instead of take you away from that. So just finding someone who can really encourage you closer to God.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we also talked about sometimes is just we found that it was super important for our relationship as we were looking for people, that we found people that we were already friends with, that it's really hard to date someone if you're not friends with them first. And so it's really important to grow a friendship and then to start dating someone that you've slowly started to become deeper and deeper friends with.
Great, appreciate that, guys. Let's throw it to Gord first, and then we'll throw in our 2 cents. I'm going to have to resist so much tonight, talking too much. Carol and Gord, what are some of the things that you guys think about when you think of what we should be considering when deciding who to date?
I think I have to go with what Cassidy said, that, the focus, and we're talking to people we hope all you guys are Christians or seeking to be Christian. on that road. And so therefore, as a Christian, the most important thing is your relationship with God. So if God's the most important thing to you, then you want to find a partner who's also going to be in that same tune as well, that they want a relationship with God that'd be very close as well. So we were talking to Oliver yesterday, and I was saying, somebody told me you don't want to just marry a Christian girl, you want to marry a godly woman. So there's even a difference there. You don't just want to have somebody who's wearing the tag of being a Christian, but you want them to be really committed to God.
And I think I'd add to that sort of what's already been said, that if you can focus on observing and being a friend and getting to know them, and also listening to what other people are saying in your life, and like people that love you or are your friends or your family, if they're encouraging you, like in Oliver and Lindsay's case, then that's a good sign. If people are saying, oh, like this doesn't look right or whatever, listen to that too. Like, God puts people in your life that have good advice, that are looking out for your best interests. So take heed.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice, Carol. There's a popular song right now by the Chainsmokers. And what's the line? It says, they tell me think with my head, not that thing in my chest, but they don't know what this feeling is like. But you're the one that I want, if that's really so wrong. So what's the next line? You're the one that I want. But anyway, it's basically saying like, no one can tell me who I'm supposed to date or not. Like, I know best what's best for me, but like, we've all seen people who, all of us as friends saw that this was not a good person for you. But when you're in the middle of the emotions, sometimes you can't see
That's
that,
right.
And so I think that's great advice. Listen to your friends, especially godly friends. I think what Gord, you said too, for those of you who might not consider yourselves Christians, if there are any of you tonight, then some of this advice might not make sense. But like for us, we're talking about what are God's principles for dating. And if we want to follow Jesus, then what's the point of dating, and how do we do dating well? And so we should also take the advice of our friends who are, seeking God as well, not necessarily all of our friends' advice. Linz, what do you think? Any advice on how to decide who to date?
Yeah, I feel like observing the other person who you're interested in, like observing them, if you're in high school, like observing them, what they're like in school, like are they actually living out their faith in school? Or, for us, we were in university, and so and at a Bible college. So, observing Oliver in ministry, like how he served people, or him playing with kids. I was like, I want kids when I'm older. And so he better be good with kids. So just like seeing him play with kids, or like the way he interacts with his family is just really important to like observe them in different settings, to like make sure they're the same person that they're like with you as they are with other people too, I think is important.
Yeah, that's great. And I think too, what you said, Gord, and what you said, Cassidy, about wanting to date another Christian, a lot of people don't necessarily think this way, but like what I think is that the point of dating is to find the person that you're going to marry. You don't know when you start dating, if that is the right person to marry, because you don't know them well enough yet, obviously. But like the point of dating is to try to find someone who would be a good person to marry. Like if you look at that person, you're like, I would never want to spend the rest of my life with them. Like, but they sound like fun for a couple of weeks. Then like that's probably not a good person to date. But the point of dating, really, as a Christian, is that we're looking for someone that we can, spend the rest of our life with, who's going to help us grow closer to God, who we can support each other through life in our faith. And so one of the things God says like super clearly in the Bible is that Christians should only marry Christians. Like there's a verse in 1 Corinthians 7 when Paul's talking about like, he was writing to some people who were trying to decide if they should get married at all. They're like, well, I'm single right now. Should I get married? And actually he says like, staying single is a really great option because you can totally focus on serving God. But he says, at the end of verse 39, to a woman like whose husband has passed away, who was wondering like, should I get married again? And he says, well, if you can stay single, that's great. But if your husband does die, she is free to marry anyone she wishes, but he must belong to the Lord. So he says like, she's free to marry, but he has to belong to the Lord. Like that's a non-negotiable. Like if the person that you're dating is not a Christian, as a Christian, then like that's just not going to work. It's not going to work out in the end. And so I think that's a really important qualification. I would love to just talk about that, the purpose of dating. I'd love to get kind of your guys' thoughts back on that. So let's throw it back to Caleb and Cassidy. Do you agree? Do you disagree? How might you say that differently? What do you think, Caleb and Cassidy?
Yeah, I love that. Like
Mhm.
when we started dating, that was definitely something that we talked and thought a lot about, was just the idea that like if you're not trying to find, if dating's not going towards marriage, then ultimately it will just end. Like, you know, you can't date someone forever. So either you'll get married to them or you'll break up with them. And so ideally you don't want to break up with people. And so with marriage being the end goal, that's super beneficial. One of the things that we've been thinking about a lot lately has just been dating as like a process of evaluation, that as you realize like more and more about this person and as you grow closer to them, you ideally want it to go to marriage, but as you get older, I think it's easier to find like what are the attributes that you want in a spouse, and then you trying to evaluate the person that you're dating and seeing like, do they match these attributes? And then also like I really liked what Gore said, like you can find a Christian person, but they're not necessarily going to be a godly spouse. And so you need to realize like, are you dating someone who's a Christian just by label, or are you dating someone who's a godly person that you want to spend the rest of your life with?
I think you want quality, not quantity.
Say that again, Gord.
I know it's not my turn, but I think the message is you want quality, not quantity.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Cassidy or Gordon Carroll, any other thoughts on what's the purpose of dating?
Well,
Easier to answer what's not the purpose of dating. I don't know.
I think it kind of depends on your age too. Like probably when you're, in junior high, even high school, maybe the purpose of dating would be more in a friendship or group setting or whatever. Like it's not, but then as we get older, we're looking for our spouse. So then the question is, do you need to date when you're not looking for a spouse, like that, or do you just focus on being good friends and having just a lot of those kind of relationships, or one or two of those kind of relationships, right? So
And dating is really sort of a modern concept. If you look back in biblical times, like my Bible reading this morning was about Boaz and Ruth, and they only met a couple of times in the harvest field and kind of figured it out, and they did what was proper, and that God blessed it. So again, timing is important. I guess I would reinforce what Carol said. If you start young, a relationship's either going to move towards something serious or it's going to break off, and your intention is for it to become serious at some point in time. So there's a danger in starting too soon, because all parties are not maybe on the same maturity position. I'll segue for a second. When I was in my first year of college, we had an assignment to read a book called, in this case, it was Letters to Philip. And it was a father, he was actually a pastor, writing to his son just before I got married and saying, here's some bunch of considerations for marriage. And I remember reading it and saying, I'm not ready for marriage. So therefore, I probably shouldn't be like aiming for a heavy duty, serious relationship right now. But that, I think God shows you at the right time in your life too, when you're ready for something more serious.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about like the ages and how we approach dating differently. Like for instance, for those of you, if there's any of you in my group who are tuning in tonight, I think just about every week when you guys come to group, one of you is dating someone else different, right? And like, I mean, most of my group is in like grade 6 and 7. And so like at that age, I don't even know what dating means to you guys. I guess it means like you have agreed to be like each other. I don't know, like you don't even go on dates most of the time. But not that I don't want to like, you know, belittle what you're doing, but I guess my point is like the way you guys seem to approach dating right now, in my group at least, can't speak for everyone, it's kind of like someone to do some fun things with, like maybe to sit together at lunch at school, or like if your parents drive you to the movies, I guess like go to the movies together or something. I don't know exactly what you do. But, and you know, when I was in grade 6, I remember liking girls for sure. But it does make you wonder, like, what really is the point at that age? Kind of like you said, Gord, like someone said this to me once, is that like, if you make a practice of dating someone and breaking up, and dating someone and breaking up, you're actually practicing breaking up. And that when you do get to an age where you're looking for a more serious relationship, or maybe when you're getting married, if you've practiced over and over, when you get in a fight or when you start disagreeing or whatever, you practice breaking up. It's like any skill, like practicing the piano, you do what you've repeated over and over and over again. And so it actually makes you more likely to break up in the end. And that's an unhealthy pattern in your life you're developing. And so I would caution you guys who are maybe younger, in middle school or something, that like, is it a good idea to practice breaking up with people over and over again? Is that going to set you up well for the rest of your life? I'm not sure it is. So that's my challenge. I think we're going to move on to the next question. Got to keep things moving here. So there's a whole group of questions that kind of fit under the same thing. So essentially, it's under this question, like, do we have a soulmate? Some people ask questions like, you know, how do you know when you found the one? Like, and they asked as well, like, do we feel like God led us to the person we married? And so those are kind of all questions that are interrelated. And so I'm going to throw this one to Gord and Carol first. What do you guys think? Do we have a soulmate? Did God lead you to the person you're married? How did you know when you found the one?
Well, I think if you start right at the very beginning and say this person has to love the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength, you're probably 95% to the finish line. Is that person your soulmate? Well, I know myself, I had a list. I had I don't know if I'd even written it down, maybe I did. But anyway, I had a must have this belief system. And then on the other side of the page was, this would be nice to haves. And it was funny how many nice to haves that Carol checked off.
Oh, I'm honored.
I mean, this is just a little segue, but she graduated from Gordon University College just before we met. Now, is that not a sign? So anyway, there was a lot of things there that we kind of, even our first few dates were like, well, that's cool. And that's cool. And I grew up in Ontario, she grew up in Nova Scotia, but we knew somebody in common. Turned out her dad, who went to school in Ontario, had crossed paths with my aunt. You know, there's a lot of just different little things that you can't say, well, that's obviously of God, but there's nice things when it does fall into place.
I think we need to just come back to God. God loves us, and He wants our best. And so, you know, if we're praying about who we should marry and who we should date or whatever, He's going to make that clear to us. And I remember, like, when Gordon and I had just been dating for 3 weeks, I remember really just pouring my heart out to God and just saying, if He's not the one, end it. I don't want to play this game, this dating game, whatever. I'm looking for a husband now. And God made it really clear to me that Gordon was the one. And that was just after knowing him for 3 weeks. And I just think, I mean, God doesn't always speak clearly that clearly, but he does have a plan for us. And I just think if we're praying about who we should be marrying or who we should be dating or whatever, He's not gonna keep that a secret.
I remember praying just perhaps a month before, Lord, if you have a wife for me, if it's according to your will, I'm ready now. You know, if you want to bring her along, you know, if you want to, kind of a thing, or sort of like that. That's kind of cool. Oh, by the way, this is our dog.
This is Elsie.
So cute.
So thank you guys for sharing. Lindsay had a list too.
Yeah. I did have a list. And Oliver, like exactly like you, Gord, there were like lots of like, oh, this would be nice if he could play guitar or whatever. Anyway, non-negotiables, but then there were like definitely a lot of things that, yeah, on my would like to have Oliver checked off.
All right, Caleb and Cassidy, what do you guys think about this question? Do we have a soulmate? Did God lead you to the person? Well, I guess, is God speaking to you about who you're supposed to marry? You're not there yet. Have you, no, I'm not going to ask that. Have you found the one? Do you think theoretically that God has a soulmate for you?
So I think something that we had kind of talked about, I like what you guys said about just like, you know, there's some things that are definitely essential, you know, having a relationship with God and not just saying they're a Christian, but really living it is definitely essential. But then there's other things that are just kind of nice to have. And so with us, I mean, we started dating in high school. So definitely, I didn't expect to meet someone that young that I really cared about. But I think for me, something that was really helpful is we were both just best friends. And so really developing that friendship first helped me to realize he had a lot of the qualities that I was looking for, just because I had gotten to know him over a while. And so I think that was definitely a big help. And I was able to see his character and to see how he treated others and his love for God. So that's something I would say. Also, we found we had a lot of hobbies and interests in common. And so just having that same, same things we wanted in life and the same qualities that we were looking for in another person was really helpful for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say like I don't think that they're soulmates in the sense that like there's one right person for you to marry and you have to go and find like that one right person. I think there's a lot of choice involved, but I think one of the cool things is that God often will put people on a similar path to you. And sometimes that's just as like friends or mentors or even people that you can mentor yourselves that you know, there's just people on similar life paths to you. And I think in the same way, like God will bring someone that you end up being romantically involved with that is on a very similar life path to you. And when he brings that person, like you're allowed to choose whether or not you're gonna date them or marry them. But I think ultimately, like God's ultimately in control. But I don't think we also need to be worried about finding like this one right person in the universe for me to marry kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a common idea, Caleb, isn't it? Is that like, you know, we're somewhere out there is the one. And what if I miss them? Like, what if I meet them and then I mess it up for some reason and I've messed up the one? Or, you know, sometimes I hear people who break up in the end, even in who are married and then get divorced. And people say like, oh, well, they weren't the one, you know, and I think that sometimes the way we think about that is unhealthy because people think like, because I don't know, in like movies from Hollywood, right? It's like when you find the one, you're perfectly happy with them all the time. You never fight, you never disagree. And so basically, I think the way people think about it is then if I do ever disagree with this person, if I do ever fight, if I do ever find times where I'm not like super thrilled with them, then this must not be the one, which means that therefore I should break up. And so I think a lot of relationships, you know, have like ended, unfortunately, because people thought the wrong way about that. And like the reality is that the person, when you do find the person you marry, you change throughout life. Like the person we were 4 years ago is different than who we are now. And so if Lindsay was the one when we got married, now I'm getting married to a different person. And so, you know, like the part of marriage and is like going through life as we change, learning how to deal with each other. And like, sometimes it's hard and sometimes we fight and sometimes there's parts about Lindsay that bother me and sometimes there's parts about me that bother Lindsay. But I still think that, but that's good. That's normal. And that doesn't mean she's not the one.
Mm-hmm.
And
It comes down to commitment, doesn't it, guys?
Yeah.
Right? Like
Both eyes open before you get married, one eye closed afterwards.
Gord, explain that to us. You explained that to me the other day, and I love that.
Well, I guess before you get married, and maybe back up to your dating time, both eyes open, meaning like be very aware, like somebody mentioned, sitting back and observing the other person before you even enter into a relationship. So both eyes open before you get married, and then once you get married, stop looking for faults, stop looking for the little things, overlook the issues, and it's more about being the right person and finding the right person perhaps too. If you want to work on something, it's not the other person, work on yourself.
That's good. That's really good. Any other thoughts on that one? God leading us to the person. I mean, I think for sure, like, again, it's like theoretically there's not the one, but then at the same time, God does, lead us and guide us and direct us and order our lives. And, when I was considering whether or not Lindsay and I would start dating, like, I definitely prayed about it and like sought God and asked mentors in my life who were, close with God as well, if they felt like, it was right for me and Lindsay to date, and if we might be, suitable to get married someday. And so I do feel like God does lead us, and that he does have a will for our lives. And so in a sense, there is one person who God, has designed for us to marry in his big plan. But the way that people think about the one is not necessarily helpful all the time, I think. I guess that's the way I think about that question.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we touched on it before too, where we said, Paul talks about, he says, I wish all men were as I am, and Paul was single.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as a committed Christian believer, you have to start off maybe and say, well, maybe God wants me to be single so I can be focused on ministry for him. I don't choose that maybe, but maybe that's what God just chosen for me. So I think if you put your whole relationship situation on the altar, so to speak, like put it before God and say, I'll do whatever you want me to do, then he may give it back to you in the sense of saying, I choose a single life for you, I choose a married life for you, but you've got to be willing.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really good. There was one question about singleness. I forget exactly what it was. But we did talk about that last month at rally night, is that, again, a very countercultural idea is that you can live a completely fulfilled life, a beautiful life, and not a lonely life either, as a single person. That, like, I think people in our culture think like, man, if you don't have a romantic relationship, like, that must be so sad, or you must be so lonely, or like, oh, you'll find somebody someday. It's like, maybe not. Like, maybe I love being single because God's called me, or it's hard, but God, is using me in amazing ways. And so I'm happy to be single. Like you said, Gord, like that's what Paul said. And Jesus too was single, and Jesus lived the best life ever. And so, no one goes around saying Jesus was lonely, or that Jesus missed out, And so I think that's something like people need to hear too, is that you don't need to have a boyfriend or girlfriend to be fulfilled in life, or to be not lonely or whatever.
I think there is a lot of pressure when you're in high school to have a boyfriend or to have a girlfriend. Like, it's a status thing sometimes, or it's like, this is where I get my self-worth or whatever, as if people are interested in me as like in that way. So it's really important to just focus on, well, God, of course, but focus on becoming the best person you can be. And can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, no, that's really good. All right, well, why don't we move on to the next question? So the next question, there was a couple of people who asked essentially the same question, which was about how far is too far in a Christian relationship? So this is a question about boundaries and about mostly, or one person phrased it specifically, physical, how far is too far physically, which is an interesting question as well. Is there other boundaries other than just physical boundaries that we should have? And so let's start this one off. Should we start this one? I guess you guys started the last one. So we'll answer first for this one. So of course, in our opinion, and from what we understand in the Bible, how far is too far in a Christian relationship?
Yeah, I feel like Oliver mentioned it. Like, there's definitely more than just physically too far. Like, I think you can go emotionally too far with someone too fast. And also just like spiritually, you don't want to like yeah, just like solely depend on that person for your faith, or like,
Yeah.
I only spend time with Jesus when I'm with that person, or I only pray when I'm with that person. Or just emotionally, like, you get your worth, you like are fully invested in this person who you may not be with the rest of your life. And so you've like poured your whole self, like physically, mentally, like spiritually, into this relationship, but that's definitely not like healthy. So I think there's definitely like healthy boundaries we can have, like physically, which I think a lot of you guys are mostly wondering about. But then I think we also need to talk about, like, you need to have healthy boundaries, like emotionally, and then also like spiritually too.
And socially. One of the things that drove us nuts in university is one of our friends would start dating someone and we'd never see them again. Because they only spent all their time with that one person. And it's like, that's not really healthy. You need other relationships in your life, other friends too. But physically, so I mean, I talked last night at rally night. I'll be the guy who says it, like, according to the Bible, having sex before you're married is not what God wants for you. It's sinful. And so I think like that's a very clear, like, there's no debate there. I think biblically is that, like, that is not good. It's sinful. It's not what God wants for us, because he wants what's best for us. And he knows that's not what's best for us. And so the question is, like, should you have any more boundaries other than just, we're not going to sleep together? Are there like other things? And so Lindsay and I had some. So we had some boundaries that we feel like, these things are either somewhat sexual in nature, or they might cause us to go farther than we want to sexually. And so our boundary, our rule was, anything that a bikini is supposed to cover, you can figure that out yourselves. I'm not going to look at or touch. So that was one of our boundaries. And we also had a boundary that we weren't going to be in each other's rooms alone, like bedrooms alone together. And we wouldn't even lie down together. Like, even if we were like in the living room on the couch, late night watching a movie, we wouldn't lie down together. That was one of our boundaries. So those are just some preventative things that we thought, like, this is either going to cause us to desire to have sex before we're married, which is also bad, or it may actually cause us to like go farther than we want to, and that we know God wants us to. And so those are some of the things, just being super vulnerable, laying it all out there for you guys. Those are some of our boundaries. Why don't I throw this one back to Caleb and Cassidy? How far do you guys think is too far in a Christian relationship?
Yeah, so like you said, the Bible is super clear that like sex before marriage is not the way that God designed it. And then also, like, anything that the Bible is also clear that you should have nothing that causes even a hint of sexual immorality within yourselves. And so like, you need to watch and make decisions for yourselves. And like, I feel like boundaries are going to change with every relationship, simply because each person is different. And so each of us will feel convicted about certain things. And so what might feel right for one Christian might be different for another, because it causes them to think sexually impure or sexually immoral thoughts that don't cause another Christian to do so. And so I think one of the things too that we had talked about a lot at the beginning of our relationship was something that my dad actually told me. He used an analogy, and he said that dating isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. And so like, if you're gonna take all of the things that you could possibly do in dating and do it all in the first month of dating, well, if your goal is to get to the end of dating and to get married, then you're not going to reach that in a month. Like even the fastest relationships really shouldn't get to marriage in a month of dating. And so you need to be careful and just watch that, like, as you start your relationships and as you go through the first few years of them, that you're not doing anything that's even causing you to think about like what we could be doing in marriage, or like different things like that. Like, you still need to have room where you can grow and room where you're not going to go too far past where you're able to continue growing throughout the rest of your relationship until you get married.
Yeah. I think just kind of adding on to that too is the idea that, instead of focusing on this is the line that you can't cross, so what's all the things we can do leading up to it, instead just to focus on like, what can I do best that will glorify God? And so, if we have that as the main goal, it kind of puts a different perspective. And so instead of just focusing on it like a checklist or, like a rush to do something, it's instead focusing on pleasing God in your relationship and just constantly seeking to learn, how can I best serve God with this person? How can I best honor God? But also, how can we best honor each other too? So I think it's also out of a respect for one another and a respect for your own personal self too.
Yeah, that's great, guys. Thank you for sharing. Gordon, Carol, why don't you guys weigh in on this one?
I strongly recommend people watch a video by Andy Stanley. He's a pastor from the States, and he gets one of his talks is on lectured guardrails. And the concept is that guardrails in real life are placed along the road to prevent you from going into rocky areas where you could crash or smash your vehicle. Where the guardrails are located, you probably could drive without having an accident, but it's to keep you from crashing further down. So guardrails in a relationship, to me, you might, and everybody's got to figure out their own, but going up to the edge of the guardrail may be safe. The guardrail itself, where it's located, may not be as risky as crashing, but you got to kind of put things into your relationship that you say, we're not going to get close to that. And why get so close, as you possibly can. I don't know if that makes sense, but another thing that we did was, when we felt that things were, getting tempting, we'd do a fast, and we'd be like, we're going to go a month and we're not even going to hold hands because we lived fairly close proximity to each other, and we wanted to see a lot of each other. So we were able to do that, and we said, well, we don't even have to think about it for this month, because that's one of the things we've decided, when it's off the table. But that was pretty drastic, but
I like what you said, Caleb, about what your dad said, because it's so counter what our culture tells us. Like when you're watching a movie, it's almost just assumed that if people are dating, that they're having sex, or that, like they just meet at a bar or something and then they're having sex. Like, and I think there's a lot of people that just assume that sex before marriage is what's going to happen. But as Christians, that's like we said, it's not God's plan. It's not what he wants. And it's actually sin to be having sex before you're married. So yeah, just making it last. And your dating time is a really precious time. Like you're not going to get that again, right? Like it's a special season in your relationship.
And arguably, if you're dating, you're not married, and potentially you may not get to marriage. So this other person who you're with, are you going to, if you didn't marry them, 5 years later you met them on the street, are you going to be able to look them in the eye and truly care for them in a caring way and not have regrets? And as well, when you do meet your partner and you find out they were in other relationships, you want to believe that they were in holy relationships too. And so the Bible talks about treating younger women as sisters, and so there's a little bit of caring for the other person in that regard too.
And I think we should mention too that, if you have been in a relationship or you are in a relationship and, you've gone too far, that God forgives us and we start over. And that's what we do in every area of our life as Christians, but it's the same with sex, like we can't turn back time, but we can start over. And that's a beautiful thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Carol, I appreciate you saying that. We did, I'm pretty sure most of you who are on tonight were at Rally Night last month, but that is really important to reiterate that, we're talking about all these standards. We're talking about all these like values we should have, or, boundaries we should have, and these different things. And if any of you are there and you're like, well, I've already messed up, like I've already crossed that, I've already, dated all these people and broken up, or whatever the thing we're talking about, that there is grace. Like God loves you anyway. You're not too far gone. There's no one who's too far gone. And like God still, it's not like oh, now you're ruined and can never have a happy marriage. Like that's not true at all.
Right.
Like that there's always grace. God can always forgive you of your sin, but also he can heal you. He can heal your heart, and he can like help you work past maybe the brokenness that you've experienced from those experiences you've had. And something I didn't say at rally night that I wish I had, and so I thought I should tonight, is that like if also you've been abused sexually, and you didn't do anything wrong, but someone did something to you, that a lot of times, from what we understand about people who have experienced that, is that they carry a lot of shame sometimes, and in some way like almost blame themselves or something. And I just want to say, like, if that's something that's happened to you, like that was not your fault at all. That like you should feel no shame for that. You should feel no guilt for that. And that like there's no forgiveness you need. You're not guilty for anything. But if there is brokenness that you feel, and you feel like, is this going to mess me up for my future marriage? Like God can heal your heart, and he can heal those wounds that you have. And so I just want to say like that, yeah, like Carol, you said that there's no one who's too far gone, and there's no one who's like too messed up for God not to redeem and to heal. And so just think that's really important to say.
Yes, yeah.
Well, there's a bunch of good stuff in there. I appreciated, so much of what you guys had to say. Gord, something you were saying there about, being able to like look the person in the eye, if you had dated them and now you've broken up, that you could say like, I know that I treated them honorably and respectfully, and now like I can be, at peace with them if I saw them later on. I think that's important. And I think you also said that like, this might not be the person you marry. And so someday down the road, like they might marry someone else. And say, you then know them later on in life, like, would you be, at peace with their future spouse? Like say Lindsay and I didn't get married, and then she married this other guy. Would I be able to like, be comfortable with that guy, knowing that I treated Lindsay with complete respect and honor and whatever? I think that's a really good way to think about it, to like think about the person as like, they don't belong to you. And so I think that's really important. Another thing that I've thought about sometimes when Lindsay and I were dating is like that, like God is her father, and like she's God's daughter. And I just thought like, if I'm in a situation, if Lindsay's father walked in the room, would I be ashamed? Would I be uncomfortable? I'd probably be a little uncomfortable, but would I feel like this was wrong, and I'm doing something wrong to his daughter, basically, on a human level? It's like, well, God is her father, and he loves her even more than her earthly father. And he's here. He knows everything that happens. And so I think sometimes, like, for me, that was a helpful thing to think through. Is like, I want to treat Lindsay with so much honor and respect, because like, she's God's daughter, and she deserves respect. So I think that was helpful for me. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to another question. How are we doing? We got 15 minutes or so. So we said that tonight, what we kind of called this is a panel discussion on healthy relationships. Well, someone sent in the question, well, what's an unhealthy relationship? I think that's a great question of, what are some characteristics or some warning signs, maybe some red flags, that this might be an unhealthy relationship. So let's go to Gordon Carroll first.
You start.
I would say an unhealthy relationship would include things like the person always wants to be with you. The person is jealous of any other friends you have. The person doesn't encourage you to kind of grow as an individual or as a, I think, I guess I'm thinking back to people I've known that were in kind of bad relationships in high school or whatever. And those are just things that come to mind, just like the other person was just trying to control them, or like they just couldn't hang out with other friends or things like that.
I think, again, talking to Christians, the first sign of an unhealthy relationship is if the other person's not a Christian. somebody once said the easiest way not to marry a non-Christian is not to date a non-Christian. So like, and where do you stop? If you start dating a non-Christian, you say, well, they're wonderful, they're witty, they're smart, they're attractive, on and on and on. That it's not going to become easier to break up. It's going to become harder. So, God's clear on it, like I said, and so that would be the first unhealthy relationship, I guess. Yeah. And I know another phrase that was given to me, not to marry a Christian girl, marry a godly woman. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, like the idea of, you don't want to just settle for, you don't want to compromise, I guess. So if it's not a relationship that's going to go the distance for certain reasons, then don't start it either. Anyway.
Gord has a lot of little sayings.
I love Gord's little sayings. They're great. They're easy to remember.
Adorable.
Caleb and Cassidy, what would be some signs a relationship is unhealthy?
Yeah, Cassidy, want to go?
You want me to start? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think something that I like to think about is just like your words, your thoughts, and your actions all will have an impact on the healthiness of a relationship. And so just being very aware that like as Christians, we are called to stand out and we're called to look different than the rest of the world. And so I think something that can kind of be a key in determining if your relationship is healthy is, does this look different than the world? Does it look like every other secular relationship? Or can people see different qualities in your relationship? Godly qualities and characteristics that are important. So things like loyalty, integrity, and wanting to honor each other, but also ultimately God. And so striving to put him first. I also like what you guys had already said just about making sure that the other person is not your everything, making sure that they aren't the complete center of your life, but making sure that's God. And so just constantly striving to grow and better yourself just by seeking after God first, and putting him first can really help the relationship to be healthier.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, so one of my favorite Bible verses, Matthew 6:33, which just says, seek first the kingdom of God and all of his righteousness. And so like within that, if our chief goal in life is just to constantly seek God first, then that absolutely applies to our relationships. So an unhealthy relationship is any relationship that's not putting God first. And so like Cass had said, like, if you're trying to fulfill yourself with your significant other, you're not going to have a healthy relationship because you put them in too high of a spot in your life. And if the actions and the boundaries that you don't set for yourselves aren't trying to please God and put him first, then you're not going to have a healthy relationship, because without him being the first person, like your first priority, you're just not going to have a healthy lifestyle at all. And that includes your relationship.
I think another thing too that just came to mind also is just lack of communication can also be a big factor in unhealthy relationships, and to just being aware to constantly be in communication with each other and prioritizing that you're both on the same page and you're both understanding proper boundaries and where each other is at spiritually, and just the different boundaries that you want to set in your relationship as well.
That's good, guys. Thank you. Linz, any thoughts on what is a sign that a relationship's unhealthy?
I don't know. Did you have something else to say?
Well, I mean, I think we already said about like if that person is now just you're only spending all your time with that person. That was something we saw in some of our friends. I think too something is like that is sometimes called codependency, which means that you are like dependent on that other person in both ways. So like sometimes that can happen when someone is struggling with mental health things. where like say they're anxious or depressed or suicidal, and they kind of say things like, I'm so glad that I have you, because like if you broke up with me, I think I would kill myself, or something like that. And that's a really hard situation. And if anyone has ever been in that situation, or you're currently in that situation, that is really scary and hard to deal with, because obviously you can't just say, well, this is unhealthy, so I'm going to break up with you, because they're saying they might kill themselves. Well, like you can't just like do that if they are serious about hurting themselves. But then also it's really not a healthy relate. Like it's unhealthy for you to be the person who is carrying them emotionally and mentally. That's putting a lot of weight on your shoulders that really doesn't belong there. That person needs counseling. That person needs professional help. That person needs, support from their family and all kinds of places, to the point where they're not dependent on you for their mental well-being, right? And so that's something called codependency that I think can happen even at your guys' age, and is a sign that like you need to help them get some help. It's maybe not a sign that like, okay, well, yeah, I got to break up with you now. But like you need to help them get some help, and then evaluate, are we both in a healthy place where we're ready to be in a relationship? Because at that point, maybe it's like, you know what, like you need to kind of figure yourself out first, and they need to learn how to be healthy on their own first, and maybe they're not ready for a relationship at that point. So that'd be something that came to mind for me. Well, we're just about out of time. We are going to finish up by 8, guys. I don't know how everyone's feeling, but there's still lots of people here. So what I would like to end by doing is just by giving you all a chance to kind of share a closing piece of advice with the students who are here tonight, advice for romantic relationships. So let's start with Carol and Gord.
Aim high. Go for quality, not quantity.
I think I would say, like I said earlier, maybe just trust that God has your best interest in mind, and don't be in a rush to find the right person, but just focus on being the right person and being the person God wants you to be. And God loves you, and he's gonna bring the right person to you when the time comes.
Proverbs 4:5 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path. So take it to him, leave it with him, and
Proverbs 3:5-6.
that one too. Proverbs 3:5-6. Yeah, take it to him and acknowledge him and keep him Lord of your life. Focus on your relationship with him first and foremost.
That's good. That's some good advice. Caleb and Cassidy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like putting God first is the number one key to success in every aspect of your life. But it is especially the key to like success in dating. Like putting God first is always going to be the success in every relationship that you have. And so I would say like that's probably the number one. And then closely following that, one of the things that we found super beneficial for our relationship was just like being really good friends first, having that that foundation of friendship really helped us to grow our relationship in healthy ways. And like we just legitimately love spending time together. And I think that that's such a blessing that like when you're best friends with the person that you're dating, or that the person that you are married to, then you're able to actually enjoy being with them. And that of course doesn't mean like that you neglect all your other friends or anything like that, but being best friends with them totally helps.
Yeah, and I think just going off of that, like when you're best friends with someone, it takes less of the focus. The focus isn't so much on, attraction or things like that, but it's more on the person themselves and their personality. So I definitely agree being best friends is advice I would give. Also, just always seeking to grow closer to God and closer in relationship with him. So just being, just constantly growing and looking for someone that's also constantly willing to grow as well. So making sure that you're in prayer with God, and you're in a constant relationship with him, both in your relationship, but also outside of your relationship. So making sure that you're not just growing your spiritual life when you're with that person, but also that you both are maintaining a spiritual life outside of the relationship as well. Yeah.
That's great. Linz, any closing advice?
Yeah, probably my advice would be like, don't settle. Yeah, I definitely could have dated different people in high school or whatever. And people would say I had high standards, but I am so glad that I didn't settle for anything less than what God had for me. And so, yeah, my advice would be don't settle. One, there's slim pickings here. And so there could be someone else somewhere else.
Might be after you leave Middleton.
Yeah. Anyways, but no, for seriously, yeah, I would say don't settle for less than what God has for you, because like Carol said, he has your best in mind and wants the best for you. So don't settle for less than that.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for sharing tonight, sharing their wisdom, sharing their experience, sharing what they've learned. And I hope that you students have found it valuable. I hope that you found it, helpful and inspiring and challenging. And yeah, I just really want to thank you all for being willing to share so openly and to share what you've learned over the years. So we appreciate you. We are going to wrap up here in a second, but for anyone who is part of the youth ministries here with Middleton Baptist or with Emmanuel Christian Congregational, next week we're online as well. So we're still going to be locked down next week, and we're going to do our Dive Deeper groups online. We're all going to, I think Emmanuel is going to have a Zoom meeting, and we're going to have a Zoom meeting. So there'll be 2 different meetings, but whatever group that you're with, we're going to jump all onto one Zoom meeting and then watch the video together. And then when we split off our discussion groups, we'll kind of split off into our Dive Deeper groups from that one Zoom meeting. So stay tuned, be watching the Facebook page and the Instagram page and all that for the Zoom link and for more information about that. But we are talking about Genesis 21 to 25 next week. So if you forgot where we were supposed to be reading this week and you want to jump back into the Bible readings, we're on Genesis 21 to 25 for next Wednesday.
Yeah, and if any of you guys have any questions from anything that came up tonight, definitely feel free to contact your Dive Deeper leader or any of us on the panel. We would love to talk with you further, anything came up out of this talk.
Yeah, that's great. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. We're going to call it a night there. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you, panelists. And I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe. Stay the blazes home. Good night.
Thanks, guys. Good night.